In the tranquil town of Salida, Colorado, an eerie mystery unfolded that continues to pervade the collective consciousness of its citizens. The tale revolves around Suzanne Morphew, a cherished town member, whose abrupt disappearance on Mother's Day 2020 sent shockwaves through the peaceful community. Imagine, it's Mother's Day, May 10, 2020, Suzanne Morphew disappears without a trace. What began as a normal day in beautiful Salida soon turned into a terrifying ordeal. Suzanne, a loving mother, vanished. She had embarked on her usual morning bike ride, embracing the tranquility of her surroundings, but as hours passed, an eerie silence fell. Suzanne didn't return. Her bike was later found not far from her home, fear throughout the town. The trails that Suzanne often traversed now bore witness to a perplexing riddle. Her husband, Barry Morphew, suggested the possibility of a mountain lion attack. Despite the rugged Colorado terrain being accustomed to wildlife encounters, something about this theory seemed unfounded. The bike was intact, signs of an attack were missing, and most importantly, Suzanne was still gone. As each day turned into weeks, anxiety grew. The hope of finding Suzanne alive was fading. The authorities had to shift their approach, and the case took a dark twist. The search for Suzanne Morphew entered a sinister phase. The aim was no longer just finding a missing person but hunting down a suspect in a supposed murder. The case swiftly evolved from a missing persons investigation to a presumed murder inquiry. Not a single trace of Suzanne was found. In the end, the case remains open, a haunting narrative etched into the heart of Salida, Colorado. It's a chilling reminder of how a serene mountain town can be jolted by a sudden and unexplained disappearance. The search for Suzanne Morphew, the missing person, had now transformed into a manhunt for the suspect of a presumed murder. Not of Suzanne was discovered, and the case swiftly evolved from a missing persons investigation to a presumed murder inquiry. At the heart of this mystery was Barry Morphew, Suzanne's husband. A native of Colorado, Barry was an imposing figure with a dominance that often seemed intimidating. Suzanne and Barry's relationship was far from harmonious. Text messages Suzanne sent prior to her disappearance showcased her animosity towards him, suggesting their marriage was fraught with conflict. Barry's narrative of the day Suzanne vanished presented several anomalies, which piqued the investigators' curiosity. His alibi was unusual to say the least. He claimed he was hunting chipmunks at the time. Yes, you read that correctly, chipmunks. Barry asserted that he was in pursuit of these diminutive creatures when Suzanne disappeared. Could this be a smokescreen, a diversionary tactic designed to mislead the investigators? Suspicion intensified when Barry's mobile phone activity was examined. On the day Suzanne vanished, his phone signals were detected around their residence, clashing with his assertion that he was away. This baffling detail, coupled with the chipmunk alibi, cast a dark cloud of doubt over Barry's claims of innocence. Their wedded life was riddled with issues. Suzanne's texts painted a portrait of a woman who was deeply disappointed and irate with her spouse. Her frustrations were not hidden, suggesting a potential reason for Barry to harm, but could these be the frantic rantings of a distraught wife, or indications of something more ominous? Nonetheless, despite the suspicious circumstances enveloping Barry, the case was far from being conclusively solved. The incriminating proof against him was mostly circumstantial, including his inconsistent alibi and the suspicious phone activity. There was a lack of direct evidence tying him to Suzanne's disappearance. The case was essentially hinged on indirect evidence, none of which irrefutably implicated Barry. However, despite the suspicious circumstances surrounding Barry, the case was far from a done deal. The evidence against him was largely circumstantial, consisting of inconsistent alibis and suspicious cell phone activity. There was no direct evidence linking him to Suzanne's disappearance, but the case was far from closed, as the evidence against Barry was circumstantial at best. The case turned into a labyrinth of clues and dead ends, with over 70 investigators pouring in 1,000 hours of work. A massive operation unfolded, with the issuance of 135 search warrants and the questioning of more than 400 people. The scope of the investigation was vast, reaching far and wide in the hopes of uncovering the truth. Among the perplexing findings was a spy pen, a device capable of recording conversations without detection, uncovering a layer of secrecy within the Morphew household. This discovery added a new twist to the investigation, raising questions about the nature of the conversations captured and their relevance to Suzanne's disappearance. Another significant discovery was the DNA found on Suzanne's Range Rover's glove box. It was linked to 3 separate cases of sexual assault, throwing a wrench in the investigation and opening up a new avenue of inquiry. Who did the DNA belong to, and what was their connection to Suzanne? These questions became central to the investigators' efforts. Meanwhile, Suzanne's brother took matters into his own hands, organizing a citizen's search 4 months after his sister's disappearance. This desperate and heartfelt effort by the family served as a poignant reminder of the personal tragedy behind the headlines. However, despite the colossal efforts, the case went cold, leaving more questions than answers. Fast forward to September 22, 2023, a breakthrough in the case that no one saw coming. As the Colorado sun began to cast long shadows over the rugged landscape of Saguache County, investigators conducting an unrelated investigation stumbled upon something startling. There, in the quiet town of Moffett, they discovered the remains of Suzanne Morphew. This unexpected find breathed new life into the cold case, a case that had, for 3 long years, seen more questions than answers. As the news of the discovery spread, a sense of somber anticipation hung in the air. Could this finally be the key to solving the mystery of Suzanne's disappearance? The El Paso County coroner was called in to confirm the identity of the remains. The confirmation came. It was indeed Suzanne Morphew. The news hit the community like a shockwave. The woman who had been missing, the woman whose face had been on countless posters and news bulletins, had finally been found. The location of the remains, approximately 50 miles south of Suzanne's home, was a far cry from the area originally searched by investigators. This new information had the potential to completely upend previously held theories and assumptions about the case. The discovery of Suzanne's remains was not just a breakthrough, it was a game changer. But the discovery, as significant as it was, also brought with it a wave of profound sadness. Suzanne Morphew, the vibrant mother of 2 whose sudden disappearance had sparked a nationwide search, would not be returning home. The hope of finding her alive, held onto by so many for so long, was finally extinguished. Yet, in the midst of this sadness, there was a newfound determination. Suzanne may not have been found alive, but the quest for justice was far from over. With new evidence at their disposal, investigators were ready to delve back into the case with renewed vigor. With Suzanne finally found, the pursuit of justice was reignited. Even with the discovery of Suzanne's remains, the case is far from closed. A chilling statement, yet it perfectly encapsulates the enigma that surrounds the heartbreaking case of Suzanne Morphew. Despite the discovery of her remains 3 years after her disappearance, there have been no arrests. The initial suspect, her husband Barry Morphew, had been under the microscope of the law enforcement community. Yet, the charges against him were dismissed, leaving a trail of questions in their wake. The dismissal came just 9 days before his trial was set to begin, with the prosecution citing the need for further investigation. This move was shocking to say the least. After all, over 70 investigators had poured more than 1,000 hours into Suzanne's case. 135 search warrants were issued, and scores from a pool of over 400 people were interviewed. Yet, here we are, still grappling with an unresolved mystery. It's clear that the case isn't as straightforward as it initially seemed. The alleged chipmunk alibi, the spy pen, the mystery DNA, all these elements form a complex mosaic that requires careful probing. The defense's argument that there was no physical evidence connecting Barry to the alleged crime only adds another layer of complexity. The story took an even more bizarre twist when investigators discovered that Suzanne had been in contact with a man named Jeff, with whom she had a 2-year love affair. But Jeff was eventually cleared as a suspect, leaving us back at square one. The case of Suzanne Morphew is not just a tale of a missing person but a narrative of a troubled marriage, a dominant and intimidating husband, and a wife expressing anger towards him before her disappearance. It's a story that has gripped the nation, a story that has left us all wondering, what really happened to Suzanne Morphew? As we await the final chapter in this tragic story, one thing remains clear. The heartbreaking case of Suzanne Morphew is a mystery that continues to baffle us all.